Hello and welcome to the Futures Lab. So this week we're making a new attack, and this is an attack that's going to start off small and grow, meaning the player needs to move out of its way. Now I'm going to make this as a star. You can use whatever shape or graphic you want, but we're going to go to the projectile sprite here. We're going to go up to costumes in the top left corner. We're going to go to the bottom left and select paint. Now we're going to name this costume as star, and we're going to make a star graphic. Now the way that I'm going to make my star graphic is I'm going to create a circle. I'm going to hold down shift as I create my circle, and you'll notice this prevents the circle from becoming an oval. It keeps it perfectly round and it doesn't all become crooked or stretched in any way. Make sure that you get your graphic perfectly centered, and I'm going to use the reshape tool to add in some little points here, just to make a little four-pointed kind of looking sort of ninja star. Now you can sharpen the points by grabbing these little things on the end of them here. And if you accidentally create additional points, you can always delete them again. Now this doesn't need to be perfect. We can always spend more time on the graphics later. You can always get graphics from the internet to use, or use other tools to make the graphics and upload them into Scratch. So I'm not going to be too fussy with how this looks. I'm liking how this is shaping up so far. Just nice and simple. Yeah, not perfect, but that'll do. Okay, so we're going to go back to the code. And we're going to create a new My block that's going to control our star attack. So we're going to go to My blocks. We're going to click on Make a block. Now we're going to call this star. Now I'm going to make this all in capitals, and I'm going to put in a bunch of inputs, and I'm going to keep going with the way that I've been doing this before, so it's nice and obvious what these inputs are. So I'm just going to name our first input as just grow. Now remember, these little words that I'm adding in before the actual add an input don't mean anything. They're just a little label for you to use later. So I've just put in grow, and then I've added an input called that G. G is going to be for grow. Now I'm going to add another label. I'm going to call this amount. We're going to add another input and call that A. And then we're going to add another text label. I'm going to call this weight question mark. I'm going to add another input, and I'm going to call this y/n. So yes or no. So we've got grow, which is going to be an input that controls how far our projectiles will grow themselves before they delete themselves. Amount, how many projectiles are we going to make at once, and weight. This is going to control whether or not we wait for all of the growing projectiles to finish deleting themselves before we move on. And so once we've done all of this, we're going to press OK. Okay, so that all looks pretty good. What we're going to do now is we're going to put in some of the stuff that our other attacks have. So let's have a quick look at what we've got under spear repeat. Okay, we've got our fade in, our projectile spawn rate, our switch costume, and our go to front or back layer. Okay, well let's go to variables, and let's pull in set fade in, and let's make that a no. Then let's pull in a set projectile spawn rate. Let's just make that 1 for now. that's going to be the amount of time in between each of these growing stars that we make. Let's go to the looks category and let's pull out a switch costume to star and a go to back layer. Remember, you can change some of this if you want. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use a variable to control how much our stars are going to grow before they delete themselves. Now we're going to go to variables here. We're going to click on make a variable, and now this is very important. We're going to say for this sprite only. Make sure that you've clicked on for this sprite only, because this variable is going to be unique to each individual star that we are making. So we're going to call this grow, and we're going to press OK. So now you should have a little projectile :grow variable that's appeared. That's all looking pretty good. We are going to pull out a set grow to whatever the G is in our input. That all seems pretty good. Let's go to control and pull out a repeat 10. Now we're going to pull out our A and put it over the 10 because that's how many of the stars we're going to make. Now we're going to make these stars appear randomly inside the box. Okay, so we're going to go to motion. We're going to pull out a set X and put it inside the repeat, and then a set Y. And then we're going to go to operators because we're going to introduce a little bit of chaos with a random number. So we're going to go to pick random and pull one of those out, put it into our set X, and another pick random into our set Y. Now, I think I like the random set X to start off at -75 and go to about 75. And I'm going to make the Y start from, let's say, 15 and go to -105. Now, if you're not sure what you want for these, then just start your game now. Make sure that your heart is selected, and don't worry because the projectiles can't hurt us yet. Just ignore the projectiles, move your heart around, and have a look at the X variable and the Y variable to have a good idea of sort of the inside of the box. So as you can see, the top Y variable for me, when I'm at the very top of the box, is 10. If I go to the bottom is -110. And if I go to the left, it's -90. And if I go to the right, it's about 90, which makes sense. Okay, so feel free to change some of these numbers, but if you're not sure and your box is about the same size as mine, just use my numbers, that's fine. All right, so the next thing we need to do is actually make the clone. So let's go to control. Let's pull out a create clone of myself and put that underneath our set X and set Y. That's all looking pretty good. And we'll pull out a wait 1 second and put it underneath the create clone, and might as well use our projectile spawn rate variable. So let's go to variables and pull out projectile spawn rate and put it over the 1. Okay, that all seems pretty good. So now what we need to do is we're going to put in some code that is going to keep track of how many projectiles we have on the screen at a time. So the way that I'm going to do this is with a variable that keeps track of all the projectiles, not just the stars. But you can do this differently if you want. You could make a variable that only keeps track of the stars. But for now, let's just do it this way. So let's go to control. Let's grab out an if. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go to operators. And we're going to pull out an equals operator, put it in between our if then. We need to get out our y/n, put it into the first socket, and then click on that 50 and type in y. So this part of the code is only going to run if we type y into our wait input. So what we need to do now is we need to go to control, we need to pull out a wait until, and at this point we're going to make our new variable. We're going to go to variables, we're going to click on make a variable, and we're going to call this variable current projectiles. This needs to be a for all sprites variable, and we're going to press OK. We're going to go to operators and pull out a less than operator, which is this one here. Put it into our wait until. Click on that 50, type in 1, then go to variables and pull out current projectiles and put it into that first socket. So now we are going to wait until the current projectiles variable becomes less than 1, so 0 or less than 1, and before the next attack starts. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go and have a look at the when I start as clone code. So we need to look across and find when I start as clone. So first things first, we are going to put in code that's going to make our current projectiles variable work. So let's get change current projectiles, put that in right underneath when I start as clone, and then get out a change current projectiles and put that right above delete this clone, but click on that 1 because we need to say -1. So now this variable is going to tick up every time a projectile is created and tick down every time a projectile is deleted. So it's going to always know exactly how many projectiles are on the screen. But there's one more thing we need to do. Before we forget, let's look for when green flag clicked, and let's get out a set current projectiles to 0 and put it right in the area underneath when green flag clicked, because otherwise we might end a game where we've got 3 projectiles and it will remember that number for the next game, which is not what we want. We need it to reset to 0 at the beginning of the game. Now, go back to your when I start as clone code. Now, what we have is our repeat until not touching edge and our repeat until touching edge code. And this code works well for pretty much everything, but it's not going to work for our stars. We want our stars not to move. They're going to stay where they are, but they're going to spin and they're going to grow. So what we need to do is we need to pull this repeat 10 down and pull these 2 repeat untils. We're going to wrap this whole thing with an if-then statement. Go to control, get out an if-then, put it around both of our repeat untils. We're going to pop this back into here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to operators, just here, get out a less than operator, and put it in between the if and the then. Then we're going to go to looks. We're going to look near the bottom for costume number, put it into the first socket of our less than operator, and then we're going to change this 50 to 4. So now all of the costumes that are less than 4, so 1, 2, or 3, are going to move, but any of the costumes that are 4 or over are not going to move. So that's good, that's what we want. And we might come back later and make a variable to control whether or not our projectiles move or not. But for now, this is a simple solution. So what we need to do next is we need to put in some code for what will happen if the projectile is specifically the star projectile. So let's have a look down, make sure that there's still a gap between the rest of our code and what happens after our if costume number less than 4. So let's go to control, get out another if then go to operators, get out this time an equals operator, go to looks, get out a costume number, but change it to costume name, put it into that first socket. You can put the number in, but I like seeing the word, makes it a bit easier. So I'm gonna say star, make sure that you spell star here exactly the same as you've spelt star here in the name of the costume. So if our costume name equals star, then we're gonna do some stuff. So let's go, we need the star to start off very, very small. So let's get out set size to 100%, put it inside the if, but click on that 100% and set it to 1%. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go to control, get out a repeat 10, put it underneath our set size, and we've got a handy little variable that we've made for how much we want our projectiles to grow. So let's go to variables, get out our grow variable and put it inside the 10. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to looks and we're going to get out change size and we're going to change the size by 1. Put that inside our repeat grow. Now I'm just going to connect this up for now because we want all this stuff to happen at the end. That's good, we still want that. And we're also going to make it so that our stars rotate slightly. So we're going to go to motion, the dark blue category, pull out a turn 15 degrees, put that right underneath change size by 1. I'm going to make them turn maybe 5 degrees. Okay, so that all seems pretty good. What we need to do now is look around for our when green flag clicked, pull out anything that's in your forever loop, go to my blocks, get out a star my block, put that inside the forever. Now for now let's put our grow as 100. This is actually going to be the percentage of the actual size of our projectile. That's what it's going to grow to. So if you say 100%, then it's going to grow to 100% of what the projectile size is. For the amount, let's say maybe 3. And for weight, for now, let's say Y for yes. Let's see what this looks like, shall we? Okay. So they're being spawned, they look good, they spin around. Now they're not growing as fast as I would like them to. So there's actually 2 different ways we can solve that. We can either look at our change size by 1 and increase that number, or if you like, what you can do is you can also go into your costumes and make sure that your star is nice and big, and that works as well. And this way, if you want, if you click on this show, you can kind of move the star around and make sure that it's about as large as you want it for 100%. So this will give you a good indication. Now I want to make sure that it's never quite big enough to fill up the whole box. think I'm happy with that. Let's give it a go now. Now these are growing much bigger and much faster. So I'm pretty happy with that. Now, having 3 all growing at 100 is really hard and almost impossible to dodge. So let's fix that, shall we? Let's go back up to our forever loop. Let's change our grow to, let's say, 50 to make them grow a little bit smaller. But let's change the amount to 7. And let's see what happens. So what should happen is 7 little stars should all be sort of spawning about 1 second apart. And that's quite satisfying to dodge, that is. Now have a look at our variables in the top left corner. We've got our current projectiles variable, keeping track of how many stars we have at any point in time. And that will prevent the attack from moving on until we've got no more stars left hanging around, still growing. So at this point, have a bit of an experiment. So you could make it so that we've got amount is 1, but our grow is 100 and our weight is yes. See what that does. Now we should have 1 star that grows very large, but it does not start making a new star until the previous star is gone. So this is quite satisfying to dodge as well. That's quite good. Now, especially if you're going to be using these attacks interspersed with some of your other attacks, then what you can do is you can turn this weight from a Y into an N, so we're not going to wait. And let's try growing maybe to 40. Amount is 3, and let's see what happens. So we've got a much more rapid set of stars being made. So you can have a bit of an experiment with this. Now, don't forget, after each of these attacks that I show you how to make, it's the perfect opportunity for you then to try and connect them all up and try different combinations. Don't forget to experiment with putting in some weights as well. And then, after you've got a bunch of different attacks, you can kind of see sort of how they combine. You can try to intersperse much smaller attacks, like maybe stars 1 with spears 1. In fact, let's try that, shall we? So if we've got star grow 100, weight no, and spear repeat 1, amount 1, let's see what that does. So you can have these cool kind of effects with these attacks kind of working together. Have a bit of an experiment. Make sure that the game you're making is not too hard. You can sort of achieve all sorts of interesting combinations. As always, you can subscribe to see the next episode. Remember to stay awesome, be cool to each other, and take care of yourselves. We'll see you next time, ninjas.